Hi and welcome everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. It's fantastic to see so many familiar names turn up for these events week on, week out. It's a real privilege to be involved in these BIM webinars. It's great to see that so many people are enjoying the value that we're adding to the marketplace. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Barie Hasib. I am the Managing Director of BIM. BIM are described by our clients as an essential BIM recruitment partner who are really passionate about adding value to the marketplace and helping the market in its entirety, really helping you guys win with BIM. I'm joined today by our expert guest speaker, Andy Hamer. Andy is the CEO of Codebook Solutions. We're holding a webinar today on BIM, Discover the Real Challenges from the Ground Up, with an emphasis on the real issues with the journey of metadata with room and assets from inception to handover. For you guys that do have questions live on this webinar today, please do not hesitate to put them in the right-hand side chat box. You'll see the screen to the right-hand side. For those of you watching this webinar back via one of our resources, please do not hesitate to forward any questions to webinars@bimrec.com. That's webinars@bimrec.com. For those of you watching this video interested in recruiting the very finest BIM staff for your BIM teams, please do not hesitate to visit bimrec.com, bimrec.com, and schedule a call in with myself. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. For those of you that are candidates interested in just exploring what is possibly out there, please do not hesitate to visit bimrec.com. With that said, it's a pleasure to hand you over now to our guest speaker, Andy Hamer. Andy, over to you.
Yes, Barry says my name's Andy Hamer. I'm from Codebook Solutions, and we have been in data management for some years. Just bear with me a minute. I'll get the right one up. Oh, okay. Can you see my screen, Barry?
Yeah, we can see it fine. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, okay, that's a good for starters. If you've got any questions, as Barry says, please feel free to put them out. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that I'm able to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose some questions. You've posed me some questions as well. I'm going to pose you some questions, and I'm going to make some observations on those questions. I'm going to run through some of the issues behind why we need to do what we're doing with data, and then give you some my views on what makes a successful BIM with regards to data, and then a little bit about what our product, so you can see it. There are others around, as you're probably well aware of. Anyway, let me get on. I'm going to try and go through this fairly quickly so we have enough time for questions at the end of it. And all the observations I'm going to make are based on our talk to clients and discussion with prospects and whatever else about data and the challenges you face from ground up. This is sort of the agenda I've put forward. Now I'm not going to run through each of these lists, and what I'm going to do is answer these questions as I'm going through. So it's not going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 as it's here. I'm going to cover it across, and from there. Just so you know who I am, this is my picture. You may have seen it on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on there. I've been around a few years. The picture doesn't show any grey hair too much, but I've seen, as it says, some significant changes in my working life, and I think what you're seeing in the architectural and construction and FM market is probably one of the most significant things you've seen since the change from CAD to, going from the drawing board to CAD. And I think BIM is probably one of those big changes as well. So I have been around change a lot, and I have been involved in data before as well. So our data credentials, why am I talking to you today, really? Well, we're only really interested in the graphical data, as Mr. Data here is on the right-hand side. That's all we're interested in. We do something with the graphical images, but it's really data that we're interested in. We've been doing this for over 20 years. It's hard to believe that the founder of our company, Peter Mann, is an architect, set this up to take some of the drudgery out of some of the bureaucratic paperwork that was required in the area that he was involved in, which is healthcare. And that's where we came out of. Healthcare was where data management requirements were much more established than they were elsewhere. It's in the last 5-6 years with the advent of BIM that we're finding that people have now started to use Codebook on other sizes of projects and sectors. And just to give you some size of the biggest project we're working on, and if one of the guys who signed up to send a question will probably know this picture, but this is a showroom in Montreal. I took this picture this time last year when it was -30. I have never been so cold in my life. But you can see it's a mega project. It's supposed to be the largest hospital building in North America. There are 14,000 rooms, as it said here. There's 500,000 pieces of equipment. And at the time I did this slide, we were only managing the equipment. Now we're managing the MEP within Codebook. There's 27,000 doors. I understand each one of those doors has about 100 pieces of data associated with them. And a common item across that is 100,000 power outlets. It just gives you some idea of the size of the project. Now, I have no idea how many Revit models they have. And I get asked that question all the time. I know there are multiple models, and I'll allude to what we think they're doing later on in the presentation. Now, all in all, that adds up to around about 500 million pieces of equipment. Now, the only way they could manage that data across all of those buildings to create a common data environment is to use a product like Codebook. And they do a lot more than just manage the data with it, but we're talking ostensibly about data here. So, just some background. We've covered, as I said earlier, our background's healthcare, but we've been involved in all these other areas, so there's a wide, I can't tell you anything about the military stuff, and they don't really tell us much about what they're doing in that, but it has been used for that. And in terms of our scope, we're a small organisation, but we have a global reach. So obviously the UK is our main market, but we're resident and operating in all those markets. Not so much Europe, it's still early data there. So the lessons learned. Now the interesting thing is, if I was sat here 5 years ago, I'd be talking about what the GSA was doing in the States. But I think that we can safely say the UK is taking the lead on BIM. I think the BIM task group has done a wonderful job, and if you've ever read any of those passages, they're wonderful bedtime reading. And you know, I think they've done a great job encapsulating the process. They don't really talk too much about the technologies, and in some respects, they don't really talk about the depth of data that's required to be managed. But I think that I'd say they're doing a good job. So I think we're going to talk about lessons learned and some easy way and hard way of doing things. This is a slide actually that one of my clients put together when we were discussing the journey of data, this linear journey. Now, we as an organisation are only interested in the BIM. We don't do FM. Just to, you know, to get that in perspective. But we see that linear journey. There's the stakeholders across the top. In my view, is the owners should be, as part of the clients, should be involved in this whole process. Now the workflow is the data's going in, it's going through some sort of BIM machine, whatever it is, into a database. And we'll talk about databases a little later on. There's reports coming out because that's what you want to do. And at the end of it, you want to export that data into Colby or Esri, maybe into Maximum, even a clean and open SQL or Access database. But the point being that the data's there, it's been captured. So in this whole scheme of things, and one of the questions is, what is the benefit of BIM to FM? Well, I think personally it's probably, for FM, it's probably one of the biggest things that can actually help them. I think there's an opportunity within the BIM to actually provide the buckets of data that can be used to start off the FM, so that, you know, with government soft landings and things like that, I think it's very, very useful. I think there's also a great opportunity with this data we're collecting, not just to collect the data, to be actually use that data and generate knowledge. I think we'll have a loop around. I think we'll end up with more knowledgeable, better designed, informed design than we previously had after we've done a number of projects. Because I think if we're sensible about it, we're capturing knowledge. In my background, from my marketing background back in the day, you know, knowledge was power, and I think that's very, very important. So there's the source of some of the data, and the data that we're dealing with. And of course, what we're going to end up is it's going to get much more granulated than that. So there's a few important questions we need to be asking ourselves, and the answers need to be honest, because I think if we're going to do a good job with data management, we have to be honest about the answers we're going to bring. Now, these are my observations. They're not necessarily Codebook observations and comments. These are my personal observations as well. So the big question, why all doing it? Well, the bottom line is that is money. It should drive efficiencies. It should increase productivity. It should do all those good things. And the historic evidence from other industries where they have gone down similar sort of routes. And I attended a conference or seminar a couple of weeks back on the economics of BIM collaboration. The conclusion was there wasn't enough evidence to say it was better than it was going to be a good thing, simply because of the state of the research at that point in time. But the point was that the Professor Michelle Baddeley, who produced the report, said that the evidence from other sectors was like aerospace, automotive, and so on and so forth. And my industry, electronics, is that it does have you know, an important impact economics. Now the thing is, why are we doing it? The question is, do we think it's a good idea on our own bats? Are we being forced to do it? Or is it being mandated by either the government or by a corporation? My feeling is that it's far better if we get it rather than actually we're forced to do it. I think there's a much better way of doing it. Now, one of the questions that's been posed is, when is a good time to do BIM? My answer is, do BIM when you don't need to do it. Do it on a project you don't need to do it on, because there's no pressure. Don't wait until you've got BIM knocking at your door. 2016's begging. You know, you should be doing it now on something that doesn't need it, is my view. And again, I would say it's better if you're willing to do it, as it were. So the other question is, what are we doing? Oh, when I spelt a spelling mistake. Anyway, I go to the BIM hub in Winchester. That's my nearest one to where I live and work. And to me, and a lot of times, actually, when you start talking about BIM, most people are talking about BIM. They're talking about building modeling. They're talking about Revit, 3D drawing. They're not really talking about BIM. They think they're talking about BIM, but they're not. And really, what we're interested in is the BIM, BIM, modeling and management. And, you know, using the euphemism of BIMBO, it's building information, modeling, management, and building operations. I think that's where we're leading to. That's that link to BIM to FM. But I think it's important that people are honest about whether they're really doing BIM or whether they're just doing 3D drawing. And there is a massive difference between the two. The other question is, what level are you doing? You know, I mean, I actually get clients and prospects who are saying, well, actually, we're still at level 0 in some respects. And God forbid that, but that's to some extent the reality. Now, there is an argument about level 3. You know, is anybody doing level 3? And I've had this discussion with some people from the BIM task group, and I can tell you we have clients who are doing BIM level 3. It may not be to the defined parameters as defined by the BIM task group, but ostensibly they're doing level 3 in terms of data management. We have clients who are working across time zones, continents, and multiple partners working on a single data model that's hosted in the cloud. So we are doing it. It is available. The technology is there today. So I think one of the biggest things is that I think isn't really dealt with directly is the investment in time resources and the money to implement BIM. I think if you're not prepared to do that, and yes, there's a big upfront cost to it, there's no, you know, if anybody tells you anything different, they really are telling you an untruth. It's going to cost you money, it's going to cost you time, it's going to cost you resources. But I think the payback, if you do it sensibly and you see the advantages of doing it, are actually mammoth. I think the project on project, year on year, the day on day savings that could be made by implementing BIM can be very significant. And that can offset in some respects the fact that you're not going to get paid for doing BIM as it is, and that's the reality. You're going to have to use the information inside BIM to generate more value to the clients you're going forward, so you can raise your revenues in a slightly different way. But I think that, and I firmly believe that if it's done properly, it's a well worth process and get involved in it. But it has to be done. This is not something you can just put on your machine, plug in, big piece of software like we have, push a button and expect it to work. It isn't going to happen. Other industries that have gone through this enterprise implementation, they don't do it that way. They look at it sensibly. They get teams of people in to help do it. And that helps then with the resources, because people have got day jobs as well. So which or whose BIM standard are we working to? That's the question you've got to be asking yourselves. You know, there's got to be some set criteria that you're working to, and if you haven't got one, then you have to come up with something. I mean, it's different if you're working for the UK government. It could be if you're working for a large corporate organisation. They will tell you what they want. But sometimes you've actually got to explain to the end user, the operator, the advantages of BIM. The other question that comes up is about corporate-wide equipment standards, whether it's office by office or by project by project. I've spoken to clients who say, we actually have people who have Excel spreadsheets that they keep in their desk because it's their knowledge they've built over the years, and they're not going to share it with anybody. Well, that is just can't happen in this new environment. If we're going to have BIM done properly, then we are going to create standards, whether they are mandated from a government or we're going to do our internal standards. We have to work to a standard set of rules, naming rules, equipment, so on and so forth. That's what it brings to the party. You know, no more hiding our knowledge. We have to share it. I've seen similar things when we've introduced customer relationship management systems into organizations. So salespeople have got to start putting data in and sharing it with people. And they go, I don't want to do this because he's going to steal my sale. The advantage is, the point is we're working as a team. And as a team, we have to share that data, and then we can all add to it. So I think there's some serious advantages of doing it, but we have to know there's some standardization coming there. I think the other thing that's important is how we see and view the BIM data, the data. Do we just see it as a paperwork exercise and not bureaucratic, not really care, we have to do it so we'll get on with it? Or do you see it as something of value? Because to me, it is valuable. And once you see there's value there, then it makes it an easier transition to this new way of working. And in reality, as somebody said at the BIM Hub about 18 months ago, is are we actually doing anything different now than we did previously? A lot of that information we would have gathered anyway, and I'll explain to some extent why this is a bit of an issue. But, you know, if we can bring it all together in one place, we're, you know, incrementally add to it, we've already got that data, we're just doing it more efficiently. The other issue is are we collaborating or are we working in a federated workflow? Now, well, we've worked with clients who initiated this. Actually, in reality, working in a federated workflow is not the same as working collaboration. It really isn't. And we've seen some interesting situations where people don't adhere to the BIM execution plan because they don't bother to read it and so on and so forth. So they end up not working as efficiently as they should do in that federated workflow. In a federated workflow, we're all working together on the same piece of data, and we're adding to it and so on and so forth. But again, it's one of those questions you have to ask yourself because that's fundamental as to how you set it all up. Now, this isn't a love-in, but if you don't love data, then you've got to find somebody in your organization who loves data, you know, who is probably more data than they are architect or construction in some respect. Somebody who loves data. It really, really is crucial. And where we've seen this work well inside our clients is where there ends up being a data czar. We actually have one client, and she calls herself the data queen. And woe betide you mess her data up. But it's important you have somebody to do that. Now, this is a big change in the industry, I think, and this is something that I think is lacking, this understanding you do need people who've got data skills, who appreciate construction and architecture, but possibly come from neither discipline. I don't necessarily think they need that. They just need to understand data and the processes, because it is a process. The other question that comes is, how much data do I need to put in the model? And I'm talking about a Revit model here, and I apologize if people are using other systems, but most of our clients use Revit these days. Another thing is that if you put all the data inside a Revit model, I can tell you one thing will happen, it'll stop. And the chances are you don't really need all that data in there. And that's the whole point of managing the data outside, frankly. That's to provide a light model. And there's a lot of data that people are going to be working on that doesn't need to be in the model, and they wouldn't be able to work on it if it was there. So you have to make a decision about that, but I think you put as much in as you need to, and the majority of it should be held outside in some other tool. So, you know, what sort of data we're working with? What do we need, and why do we need it? It comes back to that why. Because that's important. That you only sort this out with having a discussion with all the stakeholders, and I'll talk about that later. But it is important that we establish this, what we've got, what we need to do the job. Now, if you don't specify what BIM is, this is where you go completely awry, because everybody has a different view on BIM, as we said before. Some people think it's just BM, some people think it's other things. You know, even an owner or operator turning around and saying BIM, if they don't specify it, nobody knows what it is. It's important. Who's responsible for this in the workflow? You know, when does it be needed? Now, in that linear journey that we saw in an initial slide, a lot of that data is not available, but it becomes available as we go through, and it should be incrementally added to. The point is, it should be incrementally added to at the right time, where it makes sense, and that should be in coming back to how we should be applying it, and that will dictate where we go with it. But again, it's about being responsible. And I think the other thing is what we need to do is, in the days of collaboration, when we use a piece of paper between parties rather than actually working on the same data at the same time, you know, you can't just push a piece of paper across somebody's desk knowing that there's a fault there, but it's not my responsibility because somebody else is going to do something. We have to take responsibility for it. If we see a problem, we need to be identifying and allowing everybody to know about it, because I think we have responsibility in this collaborative, federated workflow for that sort of thing. We can't tolerate passing bad data. Does everybody need the same tools? Not necessarily, but it would be a good idea. I mean, in our workflow, you know, people can push out Excel spreadsheets. They can be data added in and brought in. We have other tools now that enable us to do other things, but that's one way of making sure that you know the tools are available to everybody. But not everybody needs to be in the same thing, to be honest. I mean, and the way we work, you can actually be using different 3D drawing packages, but using the same data. For us, it doesn't really matter. So some common data management approaches. Just bear with me a minute. I just need to have a quick slip of water. What we're saying is this many to many. You know, people are asking you about quality. Well, if you're managing thousands of the same room individually and thousands of pieces of equipment, then faults and issues and discrepancies are going to come into that. If we manage it centrally with an equipment library and a room library, where we manage thousands of rooms and hundreds of pieces of equipment, then life's a lot much easier. So there's that. The problem also is this data capture. You know, it's stored across a common of different formats, as I was saying earlier, and we end up with all this. Yes, the information's there, but we can't all get at it. You know, it's better being scraped into one central database. Again, if you work in that previous way, then of course the data is not accessible to everybody, or it's not linked for that matter as well. Quite important that. Significant data leakage through the construction, post-construction. If we've not got a plan for capturing it, there's data that we want that may go to FM that actually is going past our desks and we're not pulling it in at the right time. So we're trying to reduce that. it's also that validation, you know, the time-consuming and resource-intensive validation. Now, somebody was asking about validation in the questions. If you're a central library and it's linked to those models, multiple models, and I'll explain that in a little bit, then you can validate quite easily. If you've got to sit down there with all the models open and all these pieces of paper, then validation is going to be extremely difficult. And that's where validation improves the quality across the models. So, if you don't have a single source, there's no truth. There's no single source of truth across that project. And I was talking to a rather large construction company, and they were saying, well, yeah, we have multiple Excel spreadsheets that's supposed to signify where we're at with the project, but everybody's got a different Excel spreadsheet, so nobody really knows what's going on. And that's really, you know, I think in this day and age is very sad and a ridiculous situation. So what do we know? Well, from our experience, the size and complexity of data is continually growing. Now, the way it's going at the moment is everybody else is catching up with healthcare. And I don't think that the model sizes we've seen, the complexity, will ever get to the same level, other than possibly with scientific laboratories or very sophisticated production areas. But the point is they're shifting that way, that the curve is definitely on the up. And I think as more and more people see the advantages of it, then there'll be a requirement for the collection of more and more data across about rooms and these areas. It's on the up more and more. Now, I think there was this view that there's going to be this Uber model and everything will be in one model. But the reality we're seeing, certainly from clients, is that they're splitting these models down into by floor at least, and if not by floor and into these various professional areas. Now, we as a company are able to manage that data across all those models and all those different models with it on based on the professions. And of course, then you get to the situation of how do you manage all this data across a campus. Now, there was a discussion as to whether or not is BIM really applicable only to large projects. The answer to that one is possibly yes in the first instance, but not going forward, because my view is that a lot of those big hospitals, those big schools and wherever else, the smaller projects that are healthcare projects, education and so on and so forth, they're a small subset of a larger project. So if you created a room library and equipment library, you can take data out of that and reuse it. And we get clients who produce exemplar Revit models about these things, these various sectors, and then use those regardless of the size of the project they're going to be working on. So the reuse of that data works that way. So what's in a room, you know, and why is this so important? We did a straw poll a couple of years back about how much data was actually in each room, and we were gobsmacked in some respects. It was over 3,000 pieces of data. And that doesn't, as I said here, doesn't include the MEP and the doors. Now, bearing in mind, in one of my previous slides was saying that doors have around about 100 pieces of data itself to say, you can start to see that this sort of maxes up, you know, an amazing way. So if you're managing it on a one-on-one basis, there's a lot of data to be making sure it's consistent across all of those models. And it's the same with MEP. You know, stuff down the right-hand side is just the minimum we're seeing people put into it, but there's a lot more going in there as well. So, you know, we're bringing all this data mix together. We're mixing it all together now. Now, it's not such a big deal if you just got the one single model. I agree. But when you start getting like that, how do you manage 8,000 of those chairs across all those models if you've got to go into each model and manage them separately? And the same with the rooms if you've got similar room types, if you're not plugging it into a database. And of course, you've got all this data that's in different form, different media. So again, if you're managing data that way, it's very complex. Data, the design validation between what's required, or program as they say in the States, and what's actually in the design itself, well, the only way you're going to get to do it is by sitting around the table as these guys are doing, with the models open and all the equipment, these different documents on, and trying to check it out. And that really is the long way of doing it. So, just a quick review of some of today's data management tools. I'm hoping you're starting to see a theme here of why those questions are important. The 3D design solutions that are available, the main ones, The reality is they're not optimized for data, not the sort of data we're dealing with. And the other thing is, I was out in Las Vegas for the Autodesk show. I go every year. I don't like Vegas, but it's nice and pleasant, warm in December when we normally go. But the point is that during the keynote speech, they were talking about data Autodesk, but they're not talking about sharing data. They're talking about sharing files as if it's some Dropbox thing. It's not like that. The data's much more interactive. And the fact is they're optimized for managing graphical data, not the data we're dealing with. So you get in, and then there's Excel. And I've got to be careful with Excel here. Excel is really, really good for transporting data. I say that with some provisos. But the major thing is the poor data management. It's highly insecure. You know, I hear people going, "Oh, I don't need an access database. I don't need to use SQL. Excel does all of this. It's a database." It is not. And personally, if I knew this was being used on projects, as I was CEO of a large construction company, an architectural practice, and my projects were being managed using this, I don't know what I would do, but I'd be extremely upset. So it's got its place, but it's not good for managing data. It might be good for bringing it in as an initial tool, but to actually manage data going forward, it really is missing the point. Now, there's this other argument about databases. And it's funny enough, we have lots of people coming to us going, "Oh, we've got a SQL or Access database, but it won't link to Revit properly." Well, of course it won't. If you want to use the power of a database, you've got to have a powerful API to do that. And that's where us as a company have got a significant integration into Revit and all the other 3D design packages. So, you know, yes, you can use a database, but you're not going to get the full integration that you need. So this is a big urban myth, as I said before. You know, you do need a powerful API between what your database contains and Revit. You're not going to get that unless you buy an off-the-shelf tool to get that. So in terms of sort of data management capabilities, the size of the bucket or the size of the picture represents basically how good SQL is over those other tools. Now, in our instance, most of our clients have now moved across to SQL. It's much more secure. It's much faster. It takes reporting could be anywhere between 25 and 75% faster. But I think on top of that, it's the data security. It's an enterprise-wide tool. It's you know, it's cast iron really. So, just sort of ending up really, I'm sort of on the half an hour mark now, and I want to leave some time for some questions. The right tool for the right job. You don't try and cut this big red wood down with a hacksaw. And you need some big tools for doing the data management for tomorrow. So my key points for success: answer all those questions and answer them honestly. It's important. Appreciate BIM's complexities. It is complex. Appoint somebody who loves data to manage the BIM data side of things, and get them to explain to you the long-term value of that data and some of the things you can do with it. It needs senior management buy-in. You can't do this, and I see it time and time again when senior management seem to think that people can go buy a piece of software, have an hour-and-a-half presentation, oh yeah, it seems to do what I want, give it to some poor guy, puts it on his desk, a button, and it works. It's not going to work like that. You need buy-in from the above, and they need to understand they need to spend time and money on this. And this leads on to investment in implementation and training. Other sectors would spend time and money on this. These days, when we're talking about our software, it's not so much whether the software can do what people want, it's how they implement it in parallel with their workflows to get the best out of the tool. That's what it's about. and making sure that the resources within their practices are changed to meet the modern demands of these processes we're seeing. So, in answering all of that, you have to develop a plan. Now, there are plenty of BIM execution plans you can get off the internet. Good starting point, can't argue with it. Will it change? Of course it will. Will it develop over time? Of course it will. But you've always got a starting point. That's what's going to answer about what amount of data is required. That's what it's going to lead to. As I said earlier, I've actually worked with clients where the main client's got other people working in a federated way. They haven't read the BIM execution plan. So things are going awry because they don't know what they're expected. So that introduces control of the what, when, how, and why. Why are we doing it? What do we need? When do we need it? Who's going to provide it and how? That's the important thing. One of the other questions was how much data. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anybody does. And I don't think the answer is really it depends on the project. It says here, depends on the client, depends on the building type, depends on the building size. It's not a simple answer. It is as much as you need to comply with whatever's been agreed between the parties. And that's what you need. Then you can create a common data environment across multiple models, disciplines, and software platforms. That's what it's all about. But you've got to include all the stakeholders in this. I'd say there's a lot of upfront cost in doing this, in time and effort, and probably much more upfront than you would normally get without BIM. And you have to have everybody there. Even the FM people need to be there. Everybody has to be there. They need to be there and spoken to, and the plan needs to be passed around with them so that they can all have their inputs. And yes, it needs a kick-off meeting. I've been involved in some very large projects in my technology back time, and you know, we get people from all over the globe to come into one place for a couple of days to talk it over. It's a lot of expense, but it solves problems early on because they don't become problems. So you have to understand the BIM and the associated metadata isn't just for large projects. The value of this going forward is it can be reused. You're gaining more knowledge, and you can use it on smaller projects as you're going forward. But it's not going to affect the design you're doing. This frees you from to be more innovative with your designs. So BIM is to your industry, or my industry as it is now, is to ERP, which is enterprise resource planning in the other sectors like aerospace and automotive. And yes, I get it time and time again, people saying, hey Andy, we're not like the aerospace and the automotive industry. Oh yes, you are. It's coming to a street corner near you. It's happening. It will do. It's a significant change in the way you work, in the processes. So that sort of gives you my view on that. And just a quick overview, 2 seconds to 2 minutes on where we are in with it, so you understand what we're doing. And then I'll be ready for questions. So what do we provide? Well, we centralize the data, we rationalize it, we provide structure, we verify and link it. That's what we do. It's as simple as that. We provide that single source of truth because we know where everything is. That long-winded paragraph under there basically says we know where everything is in that model. We know the X, Y, Z coordinates of every room and every asset in the model. And we can attach data to every one of those. And this is the sort of bigger position or view that we have, is that we're providing this data management across this linear process with a number of products we have. And I've got a feedback loop in there for FM because I believe that's an important thing to share with people. And yes, if it's done properly, BIM, we can export that data that will go on the FM system. So we're managing the data from pre-design, either coming in using the various documents that you've got that probably pushed into Excel will be brought into an import wizard, or it could be using our new product room data collector. And we have a product for bringing information from the sort of build post-construction for warranty, service programming, that sort of thing. And we have masses of reports. I think there's over 200, and if you're not happy with that, we also export to XML. We do crystal reports. We do every flavor of report you can ever think of. And that's basically our portfolio. And really, yeah, we're a desktop client-based. We're not a SaaS-based product. It's on your desktop. And the Codebook database doesn't really care where it is. It could be on your servers, it could be on a third-party server, it could be even on our project servers as it is for some of our clients. And it's very, very versatile. The way we work is we try and make sure that we can work around the workflow, that we don't force you to put your data in the way we want you to do it. And the other important thing out of all of this, if there's one thing you walk away from when you're looking at some data management tools, is our data is there and clear and not obscured. It's very simple to get at. And we have clients who take the data and plug it into other systems that they've got and interrogate it. So it's, it's very, very powerful that way. So that's really me in 40 minutes. That's my view of data and data management. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Barry, can you just take over for a second while I have a quick slurp of my tea?
I certainly may. Well, thank you, Andy, for presenting. Yeah, there are quite a few questions that have come in. In all fairness, you've answered the latest questions just towards the end of the presentation. Neil asked, what does Codebook do differently from all the others, other products on the market? So that's fantastic. Rob says hello. Rob Moore says hello. Have you successfully exported from the Codebook to a client's FM software, or have you been asked to do this yet?
Yes, I mean we export directly, and if we can't, there's not a direct export for a particular FM system, the chances are we can export it into a flat database, and God forbid we can actually put it into Excel, and then that could be imported into an FM system. But yes, it is all of those we can do.
Fantastic, super. Question from Nigel: how does Codebook avoid or detect wrong data from coordination during BIM implementation?
Well, effectively what you're doing is, when you're building requirements for equipment library and the room libraries and the templates, you're going to sign those off. They'll change to start with. You build your requirements. So once you've got your requirements signed off, then it's basically, being put into the design. That's how we validate. So, if there's 8,000 chairs in there, you've got one of that chair is what it wants in the equipment library. Once that data's put in, you're not looking at 8,000 pieces of data for 8,000 chairs where half of them are wrong. If it's going to be wrong, it'll be wrong once and then 8,000 times in one place. So you can pretty much show you picked up a mistake. The same with the room templates, to be honest.
Fantastic.
It does help you with that.
Sure, brilliant. One from Ralph. Hi, Ralph. Firstly, is the connection to Codebook bidirectional in real time?
It's bidirectional. It's not real time. We do sync, and there is a sync process between them. But because we're not in the cloud as a SaaS service, the link between Revit and Codebook is very tight. But it is bidirectional for all products other than Navisworks, where we only schedule out of that. But we have to sync. So once you've updated something, you hit a sync button, and then it will do the sync for you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Question from Andy: do you see BIM moving to a complete package with better detailing incorporated to completely remove the need to detail for tender or construction in another package such as AutoCAD?
I don't know whether I'm actually qualified to answer that question. It's certainly true that our clients who have built up centralized databases for various sectors, you wouldn't build an older one for a company. You would tend to build it sectorially, so one for health, one for education, one for civics, one for prisons, one for theatres, whatever. And yes, you are in a position probably to create, have that information available in a much readily available way for a tender than you would do maybe in a more manual way. And there are ways that in Codebook, if the data's in there in the requirements, we can create tender documents for equipment and things like that. I think the difficulty with tendering is that every authority you go to, every government department or every company you work with in the private sector is going to ask for the tender in a different way. So there is some opportunity for standardization, but I don't think we'll ever replace it totally.
Thank you, fantastic. Raymond's asked, do you have any recommendations in the arena of BIM servers and associated software, etc., i.e. what to avoid? Similar to Lonely BIM is an element of lonely, excuse me, I've got new glasses on today, I'm testing them out, is an element of Lonely BIM implementation occurring in the industry, in that the design side of the industry was probably first to implement, then construction, then fabrication, etc.
You're probably right there to some extent, but we're seeing certainly the owners, owner operators, and a number of occasions we're seeing people, owners and operators, not using Codebook themselves, but pushing downstream the construction and the architects to do that. In terms of servers, I think that what you've got to be careful of when you're choosing your service or a data management tool is the ability to get your data in easily, and secondly, at the end of it, getting it out. I do know of, we were talking to a prospect in Los Angeles must have been last year, and they were saying that they were having to pay up to 5 years longer than the amount of time they needed to use the data management software, because as soon as they couldn't get their data out, and as soon as they start paying, it killed the server. Now, to me, that's ridiculous. My view has always been the data that's inside our databases is your data. It's not ours. We've valued that you're using our tool, but you know, it's your data, so we make it as easy as possible for you to get it in and out. And that's the watchword I'll be watching for, is how easy to get it in and how easy to get it out. And then you can choose it sensibly.
Sure, fantastic. Okay, one from Peter. In my experience, there are very few CAD models that are delivered to as built standard. This is often due to the lack of time and resources to finish the job properly. If the models are not as built, how can the BIM be used after the detailed design phase, i.e. who will pay for the additional work to be done?
Well, with the clients that we're seeing, that's the whole point they're using Codebook, because you know they're bringing the requirements in, they're consolidating those so they know what they want. It's all being signed off. It's then being put into the design, into the 3D models. It's then being validated. So we don't see that situation, because that's what Codebook overcomes as a product.
Fantastic.
And then that data's there then available.
Sure, fantastic. Okay, one from Kuba. What is the future of shop drawings, particularly for steel connections? Particularly for steel connections, though. Autodesk recent acquisition of Advanced Steel is a good advantage, but when we are getting this all in a single platform, that is Revit. Not sure.
Revit. I mean, look, Revit. Autodesk is going to add more and more functionality inside Revit. The data management skills are questionable, but in terms of all that other sort of data management from a graphical point of view and design point of view, then yes, they're going to buy stuff, and yes, it's the same way as Microsoft go and buy stuff, and it gets input in, you know, included in Excel or Word or PowerPoint, or you know, it's going to happen, and
sure.
You are going to gravitate towards one of the 3 main suppliers, I would hesitate to say.
Sure, yeah, no, fantastic. One further question as well. If anybody else does have any questions, quick questions, as I say, do put them in the box. This one's from William. What direction do you see the industry going using BIM technologies? What do you consider to be your greatest challenges using BIM?
Our greatest challenge is actually getting the industry to understand that they need a tool like ours to manage that data, and that's why I went through the PowerPoint bits of what you're actually going to encounter. I think there's an underestimation and not an arrogance. There's an underestimation of how much data. An example of that is we went to an engineering company, well, consultants who had been given a project by a university to move and validate 3 buildings as what was going to go into the assets. Now, they intellectually go, yeah, it can be done, but they're not really understanding, not taking it back to its first principles of why we're doing it, and sort of they're not really appreciating the data for what it is, and they see it too simplistically, and not that it is complex. I mean, 8,000 chairs across 5 buildings, that's a complex thing to manage.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Ralph's asked as well, there is a move in US federal government, FedIFM, to disconnect the data from the application. Have you got any comment on that?
Well, to some extent, you could actually argue that's what the BIM task group done with level 3 BIM, of actually having the data in a data hub outside the models so that it's available for everybody. And so I don't see that as any different. To me, it seems sensible, because I think we have a lot of clients who, when they're working with the data, they're not working with Revit. There's a few people working with Revit, and lots of people working with data.
Sure.
So to me, it makes a sensible move.
Sure. Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, on that note, Andy, I'd like to thank you for your time. I'm cautious that you've got a bust off, which is attended today as well. Thank you. If you do have any questions for Andy, you do have his details on the screen, so please don't hesitate to send Andy an email. Have any questions for me at all, please don't hesitate to contact me. Andy, is there anything else that you would like to say?
Just a big thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to everybody today. And as Barry said, if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them offline. And if anybody actually wants to see Codebook and the products we've got, we've just introduced a new one, more than happy to show you that.
Brilliant.
Please feel free to drop me a line.
Fantastic.
Thanks again.